Here's how we break that topic of information down. So the engineering blueprint at Symantec, if you like, the thing we're building, which I'm going to share with you in a second, is really focused on fundamentally these sorts of things. So the first one, which you'd expect from us, I guess, and the thing that the yellow boxes in PC world talk to, and everybody's kind of knows Symantec for, is this topic of risk. So that's traditional security risk, what I term keeping the bad stuff out of my organization. It's increasingly data loss risk, so keeping the good stuff in. That's been a new focus for us over the last 3 or 4 years. But it's also things like availability. So I could have the greatest security policy in the world, great governance surrounding that, but if I can't get to my information, it doesn't matter if it's secure or not, because it's not being delivered to me in an appropriate way, and therefore I can't do my job and my business can't run. So the topic of information risk is quite broad. A lot of people, when they talk about information risk, they really talk about security. Our point of view there really is it's broader than that. And for those of you that remember us from 5 or 6 years ago, the Symantec organisation then bought an organisation called Veritas. That category was what that was about. What we recognised was that we were all over this. Traditional Symantec was all over security and compliance, but it was missing information availability. That's fundamentally what that acquisition was all about. Again, honestly, hand on heart, we didn't do the best possible job at telling people that's what it was about. So that you know, that's what it was about. So the next category is around growth, and I know that you and your customers are experiencing issues here, and there are business challenges around this, and we're going to talk about this in a lot more detail a bit later on. But this is we see information growth as a key category to solve with our strategy for products. Okay, and that's really about fundamentally dealing with the business of unstructured data as well as the traditional business of structured data, and I'm going to talk about that in lots of detail as we go through. And then the last one is what we're terming information infrastructure. So this is about where the stuff lives and how it gets delivered across some kind of network to our users. And of course, this is important, as we'll see as we go through the presentation, because it isn't traditional infrastructure anymore. I can't remember the last organisation that I spoke to who isn't in some way evaluating the concept of cloud, evaluating the concept of service delivery in a non-traditional way. And so if Symantec weren't paying attention to this, we would be remiss, and we would certainly be missing an opportunity, if not now, then in 2 to 3 years' time. Particular area of interest right now, and I'm going to talk about this later as well, is mobile. So fundamentally, we're investing, most of the investment you'll see from us in the next couple of years is going to be in that space, and we'll talk about that in some detail. So to put that another way, what I'm going to show you now is what I term our engineering blueprint. Okay, so this looks quite flashy and marketing-like and PowerPoint-like, but actually I've created it based on an internal piece of documentation, which is the blueprint for our organisation in engineering. Okay, so what you're about to see is everything we're doing. If you see an acquisition that we make that doesn't fit this somehow, or you see us developing some software that doesn't fit this somehow, you should raise your hand, because something's gone very, very wrong. Everybody in our organisation, from an engineering perspective, is building what you're about to see. Okay? So it starts with information infrastructure. And I guess the yellow boxes here really, if I don't like doing kind of product portfolio pitches, but if I were going to draw on a flip chart, the stuff, the software categories where we play, it would be those things in the yellow. That's how we kind of classify the bits of our portfolio. So over here you've got kind of fairly traditional Symantec-y type stuff, security, endpoint management. This is largely Veritas and other things that we've added to the portfolio over time. Now the reason I want to sort of highlight this is not to show you what they are, hopefully you kind of already knew that. What's important is the stuff that's in the grey. So a major part of our investment strategy for the past 5 years and continuing into the future is making sure that where it's relevant and appropriate to do so, and that by the way is based on demand from you and your customers, that we are able to deliver these things and the products that sit within these categories in any of these ways. So if we go back, if we rewind kind of 6 or 7 years, almost everything we were delivering in those yellow boxes would be coming through this channel, through the physical channel, right? So what hopefully you're starting to see from us now, and you're going to see much more of, is much more flexible delivery mechanisms for the products in our portfolio. Now that's no mean feat. That's taking software, in some cases that's been around for 20 years, re-engineering it from the ground up and making sure that it's appropriate to these channels. But that's a big area of investment for us. The next layer of the blueprint here really is what we call the information intelligence layer. So it's our belief that once you've got the infrastructure right, the next thing to focus on is how do I get the most from my information? And I'm not going to talk about this in lots and lots of detail, but you can see from the categories here what we think that looks like, okay? So there's things like classification of data. What is my data? Who owns it? How critical is it? How sensitive is it? How quick does it need to be? Classification of data. Things in here like encryption. So if you're talking to a customer about, in particular, public cloud, a topic that's definitely going to come up is how do I authenticate? How do I encrypt? It's definitely going to come up. And so for those of you that have had your eye on us over the last couple of years, you'll know that we made a couple of acquisitions in this space, not least of which VeriSign around authentication, and also PGP and Guardian Edge around encryption. Things like discovery. So how do I find data? And we recently made another acquisition in the archiving space, allowing us to essentially take a leadership position in, for example, around exchange discovery. So if I need to do a legal search in my exchange database, how can I do that with a best of breed tool in a way that's intuitive to the business? And so that's another area of investment for us in that area. So the information intelligence layer is where we've been making a lot of acquisitions recently and where a lot of development has gone on. And then the last layer is this governance piece. So it's our belief that to have an information-centric IT strategy complete, you need to be focused on governance. So it's okay to say, well, I'm going to classify data, but what's the policy for that? Why do I need to classify data? What's the reason for it? What's the governance that surrounds that? And so when we're now working with customers on information IT strategy, despite the fact that we've built this from the bottom up, we would typically focus top down in terms of development of the strategy. Who are you? Who do you want to be? What are you trying to achieve is where the conversation should start, and then we kind of trickle through the rest of the layers. So what you're seeing on the screen there is everything. That's everything we're doing. And again, if you see us do something else, please scream, because we shouldn't be, okay? Now, of course, the value of this comes through integration. And so if there was a category of investment across our various engineering business units that I would draw attention to the most right now, it's those people being joined up and thinking about what happens when I join the dots. What happens when, you know, I mix some of this stuff with this stuff? What sort of business problem does that solve? And so there's a huge amount of effort going on internally at Symantec now to focus on that. For those of you that know some of our executives, a chap called Francis de Souza recently changed his position. So he was the SVP responsible for the security portfolio. He was promoted in April. He now takes on an EVP position, giving sort of overall guidance and governance to all of our engineering divisions. So it's his job to bring things together and to break down any internal barriers that there might be between those engineering divisions. And what comes as a result of that is this sort of concept of joining the dots. Now, what that leads to in project terms, in real terms, to give you a quick example, are things like this. So we have a team in the field in EMEA here of solution architects who can take that portfolio, take that engineering blueprint, and based on feedback and what they're getting from customers in terms of requirement, they can start to build architectural blueprints, essentially. And here's an example of one. So if you wanted to build a cloud for storage, for example, public or private, here's how we'd do that with you, okay? And we build that out in a non-Symantec way. This is based, for those of you that are interested in such things, on TOGAF, engineering and architecture principles. And what we, of course, can do with these blueprints once we've developed them and once they're appropriate to the customer need, is we can then layer onto those things from the blueprint that you saw a second ago. Now, this is much more detailed. So, you know, CFS, for example, that's part of the storage management yellow box that I showed you. So now we're getting into a little bit of detail. But what we're finding is that in talking to customers about some of those big problems that I mentioned, this sort of device is incredibly useful and powerful, because you can not only show them in industry terms what best practice should look like, but then it becomes very obvious and easy to sell the breadth of the portfolio as opposed to the point solutions, which perhaps we've been guilty of doing historically. Okay, so that's high-level thinking, seesaws, risk and efficiency, keeping it balanced. It's what we're maniacally focused on as an organisation from an engineering perspective, which is information. That's the company asset that Symantec are focused on. And you've seen our engineering blueprint. all the pieces of the puzzle on one diagram starting to be joined up and solving some problems. So let me give you some more examples now as to problems we're solving with that portfolio and that blueprint. And I'm going to use, to do that, I'm going to use this concept of what I call megatrends.